Guardian Druids transform into massive bears to absorb damage and protect their allies as a tank in the war within. I am going to show you everything you need to know. And this will be two things. It's going to be beginner friendly, but it's also going to be good for veterans who just want to see what they're doing, because I will be including all information, but explaining it in a bit more detail for those beginners who may not know everything or maybe new to WoW. So starting off then straight away with our primary stat, it is going to be agility. This is going to increase the magnitude of our attacks and abilities and increase our dodge chance. So basically increasing our chance to dodge out of the way of attacks and also increase the damage that we do as a Guardian tank. After that, we do have stamina, increasing our health, and armor, reducing damage that we take. And this is quite important. But generally that's going to come on all of the armor that we get. Always prioritize getting a higher and higher eye level of gear, and that's always going to have more agility on it. We then have our secondary stats, which aren't as important. Now, we do have a general stat priority, which you can see here on screen. However, I would only really advise looking deeply into which stats you should go for on gear when you're actually comparing two pieces of gear of the same eye level. Again, higher eye level with more agility is always going to be better. So what do these secondary stats do? Haste is actually going to increase how fast we regenerate our resources. It's going to increase how fast we're attacking, like me attacking this target dummy right now. And it's also going to impact how fast our attacks actually do damage, like this Moonfire that I've just applied to the target. We have versatility. Increases the damage and healing done by you, but also reduces damage taken. And it's a very rounded out stat. Well, critical strike gives us a chance to do double damage. Mastery is different for every single spec. For us Guardian Druids, we have Nature's Guardian. Increases your maximum health and healing received, and also your attack power, and therefore how much damage you do. So it's a pretty well-rounded mastery for Guardian Druids. The more we have, the more damage and healing we get and do. Now, while we're here, let's just have a little look at what our set bonuses on our gear are doing in Season 1. If you are new and you don't know what these abilities, etc. are, don't worry. I will be explaining this in full in the rotation part of the video. For the two set then, our Thrash and Moonfire, increase damage done and reduce damage we take by 1% for 8 seconds, and this will stack 3 times. Our 4 set, Arcane damage you deal is increased by 5%. And any bleed damage you deal is also increased by 8%, just pretty much increasing damage done then for us Guardian Druid. So moving on to the utilities and kind of defensive spells that we have as a Druid, I'm going to be showing you the most important ones now. That's not to say that there aren't other utilities available. There are quite a lot you have as a Druid in your toolkit. However, as a beginner, I do not want to overload you, and these are really the ones you need to worry about. Once you're more comfortable with the specialization, I would just go through your spellbook and the Druid talent tree, so that's the talent tree on the left, and just see the other bits and bobs that you do have available. So starting off with, on the left, what we can do to our enemies to stop them, we've got Cyclone. Throwing our enemy up into the air, incapacitating them for a few seconds. That does mean that we can't attack them and they can't attack us. We've got Hibernate here, forcing our enemy to sleep for 40 seconds, but damage will awaken them. It does only work on beasts and dragonkin, so you need to kind of work out, who is my enemy here. We have Typhoon, one of my favourites. It's instant, so you can see I can use it on the move here on these target dummies. It's going to blast away your enemies, knocking them back, and also slowing them for a few seconds. Speaking of slows, we've got Ursul's Vortex here, and you can place this wherever you want. You can see here this vortex appears, and enemies inside it are going to be massively slowed. Now, when they try and exit it, they'll be pulled back into the center of the vortex when they first attempt to leave it. And lastly, we have Entangling Roots. You can see here, I'm going to entangle the target dummy in roots. Now, it sometimes will actually be interrupted by damage, but not always. Now on to the things we can do to improve our quality of life for us and our allies. We have Dash here, increasing your movement speed by 60% and immediately putting you into cat form. One thing I want to note is that when you do go into cat form, you will actually be increasing your movement speed by 30%. So going into Dash will add another 30%. Just to reiterate that, Dash is going to give you a 60% movement speed buff for 10 seconds, but going into cat form will speed you a little bit anyway. We've got Renewal, simply renewing 30% of your maximum health. We've got Innovate, giving to you or a fellow healer unlimited mana, basically, for casting spells for 8 seconds. So when you cast healing spells for the next 8 seconds, it won't cost any mana at all. Then we've got Bark Skin, reducing damage taken while also increasing healing taken. Your skin is as tough as bark. And you can use it while stunned, feared, frozen, asleep, etc. And lastly, we have Mark of the Wild, increasing the versatility by 3% for you and any party or raid members. You can also use it on people in the wild. I could probably even use it on this NPC here. Let's see. No, it doesn't work. But you can use it on people just out in the wild. You can target them and then use it on them, and it will increase their versatility. Remember, that is the stat that increases damage and healing done and also decreases damage taken. So again, it will actually affect you, your party and raid members, or people that you target out in the open world. And that is it. The last one, as I said, go through your spellbook. The last one I want to mention is Rebirth. Usually you can only resurrect allies out of combat, but Rebirth will let you actually resurrect them on a 10-minute cooldown when you are in combat. So if somebody dies on a boss fight, you can actually just resurrect them there and then. Do be careful where you do this. You don't want to resurrect them into something, but this is a really, really useful utility that we have. And the cooldown is shared among the party. So if you have like a Death Knight, another Druid, or anyone else that has paladins that have, combat reses available, the cooldown is shared between you. Now, of course, for the exciting part, which is the rotation we are going to play. Now, to start with, we are, of course, going to be in bear form for this, and we are going with Druid of the Claw for both the raiding and M+ or AoE builds. And the rotations are extraordinarily similar. So, first off, looking at what we've got here, we have Heart of the Wild on a 5-minute cooldown. You're going to want to use this as soon as you go into the fight. Abilities not associated with your specialization, so Guardian, Druid, are going to be substantially empowered. Balance, cast time of spells reduced by 30% and damage increased by 20%. Feral, you gain more combo points and restoration, healing is increased, etc. Now, one of the main things here with the damage being increased is we are going to be using some balance spells for the War Within, which is really, really nice as a Guardian Druid, meaning we can get a lot more damage out there. And that is how Heart of the Wild is going to come in helpful. Now, we were just talking about balance spells. One of your main priorities here is going to be using Moonfire. And as you can see, it actually got a proc there. Galactic Guardian is one of the talents we have. Your damage has a 5% chance to trigger a free automatic Moonfire on that target. And when it does occur, your next Moonfire that we actually press will generate some rage and deal increased direct damage. Rage is one of the main resource we're going to be spending as a Guardian Druid in the War Within. And some abilities are going to generate it and some are going to spend it. So whenever you see that Moonfire proc, do use it. And we also want to keep up Moonfire at all times on our target. After that, we're going to use Thrash, and we're going to use this all the time on cooldown. Strikes all nearby enemies, dealing bleed damage and an additional amount of bleed damage over 11 seconds when applied from bear form, and it can stack up to 4 times. We're also going to use Mangle in cooldown, unless we are absolutely overcapping on our rage like we are right now. Mangle will also generate 17 rage, mangle the target, dealing damage, and it deals 20% additional damage against bleeding targets. And of course, Thrash will make the targets bleed. Then we're going to use our Incarnation Guardian of Ursoc cooldown, an improved bear form that grants the benefits of Berserk, causes Mangle to hit 3 targets, and increases your maximum health by 30%. This will also last 30 seconds. Now, if you're not sure what Berserk is, that is replaced by the Incarnation Guardian of Ursoc, and it's this ability here. You go Berserk, reducing the cooldowns of a lot of your abilities. Then we're going to use Rage of the Sleeper. We're also going to use this on cooldown. Unleash the Rage of Ursoc for 8 seconds, preventing 20% of all damage you take, increasing your damage done, and granting you some leech so you get some health back on your attacks, and reflecting nature damage back at your attackers. How we're actually going to spend all this rage we're generating then? Well, that is going to be with Maul. Maul the target for physical damage. And that is the main way that we will be spending our rage. Now, we do also have this talent here, Tooth and Claw. Auto attacks have a 20% chance to empower your next cast of Maul or Raise, stacking twice. An empowered cast of Maul deals more damage, costs less rage, so it's basically free, and reduces the target's damage that they deal to you by 12% for 6 seconds. And that is a really good proc that we have here. You will sometimes see that we also get Ravage, and that is coming from the hero talents, which I will be explaining shortly. Now, you'll notice that Moonfire is on our action bar again. The reason we're using it at a really high priority here is just to make sure we're keeping it up on our target at all times, whereas here, we're using it when it procs. So if you're wondering about the order of importance, that is kind of how it flows. Then we have Iron Fur. This is a fantastic ability as a Guardian Druid, and it also will cost rage, 40 rage to be exact. Increases your armor for 9 seconds. But you'll notice when I use it, it can actually stack, increasing your armor further and further. And this is a great way of defensively using our rage. You can think of Maul as our offensive rage spender, and Iron Fur being our defensive rage spender. And then if your health dips low, we can use Frenzied Regen. It's only on a 33-second recharge with 2 charges. Heals you for 20% of your health over 3 seconds. And if we have anything else, if we just don't have anything else to press, then we can use Swipe here. Swipe all nearby targets, inflicting damage, deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. And that pretty much is it for the single target rotation. Don't forget you can Growl to taunt the target in case you lose aggro. And if we go into the Mythic Plus build, you can see that actually quite a few talents are changing. However, really, we're not actually changing much at all. It's only going to be Lunar Beam that is the additional ability that we now have. And where does this slot into our rotation? Well, after using Incarnation of Ursoc, use your Lunar Beam as well. You can see this makes this big lunar area on the on the ground and in the air actually. Summons a beam of lunar light at your location, increasing your mastery by 15%, dealing arcane damage and healing you over 8 seconds. And because that's kind of like a big area in AoE, that's why we use that in the Mythic Plus build. Now, both of these talent builds will be in the description, but as I said, for AoE, we pretty much just do the exact same thing. We are also going to be taking Druid of the Claw for this build as well, and I'll be going through that with you now. So in this build, we are going with the Druid of the Claw hero talents. This is available to both Guardian and Feral DPS Druids. So if you do change specs and you really like Druid of the Claw gameplay, you can also use it in your other spec as well. So going through it then, we're starting off with Ravage. It's a passive where your auto attacks have a chance to make your next Maul become Ravage instead, where you're slashing through your target in a wide arc, dealing damage to your enemies and to all other enemies in front of you. So basically, our auto attacks have a chance to make our next Maul do that AoE arc damage as Ravage instead of Maul. Going down the left first, you have Fount of Strength, basically increasing our resources on our character, and also some regen as well. Again, with Wild Shape Mastery, we're keeping some of our armor and health when we're switching forms, and Iron Fern Frenzied Regeneration will also persist in cat form. For 6 seconds after entering bear form, you heal for a small amount of damage taken over the last 8 seconds. So again, more regeneration talents there. We then have our first option, Empowered Shapeshifting or Wild Power Surge. Again, quite utility focused, I would say, on Empowered Shapeshifting, where Frenzied Regen can be cast in cat form for 40 energy. Bear form reduces magic damage you take, and Shred and Swipe damage is increased. Mangle damage also increased. Wild Power Surge, however, Mangle grants feline potential. When you have 6 stacks, the next time you transform into cat form, gain 5 combo points, and your next Ferocious Bite and Rip deal increased damage for its full duration. I would go for Wild Power Surge if you're in Feral, and pretty much Empowered Shapeshifting if you're going Guardian, and that would be the choice I would make on those nodes. Dreadful Wound, now going through the middle. Ravage, remember that's the ability we're going to get from our Maul up here, also inflicts a bleed that causes damage over 6 seconds, and saps its victim's strength, reducing the damage they deal to us. We also then have another choice, Ruthless Aggression or Killing Strikes. Ruthless Aggression, quite simply increasing our attack speed when we use Ravage, or Killing Strikes. Ravage increases our agility and the armor granted by Iron Fur by 20%. Your first mangle after entering combat makes your next maul become Ravage, and that's 100% chance on there. Aggravate wounds. Every maul, raise, mangle, thrash, or swipe you cast extends the duration of your dreadful wounds up to an additional 8 seconds. And again, dreadful wounds is the talent we chose up here. Going on to the right-hand side, maul and rage damage is increased. Stampeding Roar's duration is increased. Really nice utility there for increasing the duration of the speed we can give our allies. And then Tear Down the Mighty. The cooldown of Pulverize is reduced. Or Strike for the Heart, where your critical strike chance and strike damage are increased, and Mangle heals you for 1% maximum health. If we need the healing, I would go for Strike for the Heart. Otherwise, if we're losing, Pulverize more, then go for that. Lastly, on the bottom, Claw Rampage. During Berserk, Mangle, Swipe, and Thrash have a 25% chance to make your next maul become Ravage. So it all basically is, there's a good amount of utility in Druid of the Claw. I really, really like it, with things like Pax Endurance and the talents we've got on the left side, just doing kind of loads of bits and bobs on your different regenerations, etc. And then also getting, some AoE damage out there with Ravage. I really, really do like Druid of the Claw. Hopefully you guys do too, because that is what we're taking with this build. For the consumables and enchants, etc. that we're going to be using, the first thing first is that we can now get Nerubian Gem Weavers. This is how we're going to get extra slots on our gear from the weekly vault, and you can put that on your head, wrist, and belt. On the cloak, we're going to put Chant of Winged Grace, giving avoidance and reducing fall damage. On the chest, it's Crystalline Radiance, giving primary stat. On the wrist, it's Armored Avoidance, great for tanking. Stormbound Armor Kit, giving primary stat on your legs. Defender's March on the boots. I would go for versatility on your rings, depending what you need more as a secondary stat, especially if you're simming, could change this. But I do always like in tanking, just getting a bit of extra versatility to increase damage done and also reduce damage taken. I think you can never go wrong with that. And for the weapon, whether you are a tank with a two-hander or dual-wielding tanks, I do think Authority of the Depths is always going to be the best weapon enchant for you in Season 1 of The War Within. What this does is, when you're doing damage, it will sometimes do big shadow damage to your enemy, and that can stack 3 times. For the actual consumables you're going to be using, generally, again, I would go for the Tempered Versatility Flask, again, giving you a good all-round. Feasts are fantastic, of course, for primary stat. Tempered Potions basically will give you massive increases to your secondary stats that you don't get from your flask. So everything but versatility. Algari Healing Potions, and then Whetstones. There's 2 different ones depending on obviously what tank you are. If you're using sword, axes, polearms, maces, staffs, and fist weapons, then you can use, there's 2 different ones to choose from there. Crystallized Augment Runes will give you primary stat. And finally, on your on your sockets, you're going to go with the Culminating Blasphemite. It's going to increase primary stat and give you more crit effect depending on how many different coloured gems you're using, like sapphires, onyxes, emeralds, and rubies. You want one of each colour at least to get the full effect from the epic gem. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.